The main issue we're going to talk about today is, I think, how we relate Mekhitarians and the global Armenian and innovation. Before that, I have to plug in Professor Zekiyan's tomorrow lecture at UCLA, Royce Hall 314. Yeah. It will be about, the title is Abbot Mekhitar of Sebastia, a Sacred Genius and an Enduring Challenge for Today. That's also what we're going to talk today. It's at 1:30 p.m. There is lunch and then free for all, and then we'll listen to his lecture. So we're talking about the little credit Mekhitar has gotten after all what he has initiated. He did a lot of things, but his project did a lot more 300 years ago. All of us know about Mesrop Mashtots, the alphabet, the translation of the Bible, and a lot of literature, but we don't think about Mekhitar and the Mekhitarians usually when we want to know how did we get to this stage of modern Armenian and modern Armenian literature, and us speaking in Armenian, usually. Can you reflect some on that?
Yes, I would say that also our knowledge of our great forefathers, you mentioned Mesrop Mashtots, but we can mention many others, or the great names, for instance, St. Gregory of Narek, recently was declared by Pope Francis as a doctor, universal, for whole Christianity. St. Mercesnorali and many others. If we ask what we know about them, I think we know their names and some superficial knowledge of what they did. Also, the Mekhitar is known, for instance, for the Mekhitarian schools, or the Mekhitarist schools. There are different schools, and just some minutes ago, some persons asked me, will you found again a Mekhitarist school here in Los Angeles? There are still recent years, middle school, and by the schools, the name of Mekhitar is known enough, I would say, in our people. But what Mekhitar really did, it's not so. I will give only one example. All languages have their great dictionaries. The so-called thesaurus. The English language, for instance, to the best of my knowledge, has Webster. Well, the first great dictionaries of this kind, I enumerate them. Old Greek in the period of Renaissance, and immediately later, Latin, Italian, Spanish, French, and the sixth great dictionary published in 1749 was the big dictionary of the Armenian language made by Mekhitar himself. The great dictionaries for two of the greatest languages of Europe, and we can say of the world, for English and German, will come later. I think this only fact is enough to give an idea of the worldwide dimension, of the great humanistic dimension of what Mekhitar did. And he has been a forerunner, not only for Armenians and among Armenians. He has been a forerunner for many different aspects of knowledge, of science and of life, of culture. I would say, especially in the Christian world, and to some extent, generally for human culture, for human civilization. I give another example. Today, almost all Christians speak of ecumenism, the ecumenical movement, which flourished at the beginning of the 20th century. Mekhitar was an ecumenist, an ecumenical spirit, an ecumenical mind before 200 years of modern ecumenism, of current ecumenism. And I can enumerate, but of course time is limited. Really, I agree fully with Leo Arakel Babakhanyan, who says when he will start dealing with Mekhitar in his huge history of the Armenian people, where he speaks of Mekhitar and of the Mekhitarians for 100 pages nearly, he will say, no, we shall speak of a person who is in the line with the great, the old, the ancient Armenian tradition, but who is also different from all people who preceded him. So to give an idea, of course, we could continue, but perhaps you have other questions.
We talk a lot now about a global Armenian, or some people also loosely call us a global nation. And Mekhitar, 300 years ago, conceived his project as a global project. Financing was global. The members of the congregation, researchers, monks were globally supplied, let's say. And the diffusion of their research, scholarship, their books, bibliography has been global. Now we are a lot more globalized. We didn't anticipate how would globalization influence or change our identity or the diasporic condition. Some things with it, others we don't know. Sometimes it's even a positive influences. And even today, we cannot anticipate what will going to happen in 15 or 20 years. Being a Mekhitarians, or having had the Mekhitarians such an innovative past tradition, first, could you reflect on their global approach to these things, and then how can they contribute today to our difficult situation?
So I would like to make two premises. That is one, as everything in life, in real life, have positive and negative dimensions, positive and negative aspects. So also globalization. Second, Mekhitar is in everything, is all the great people, a mirror of his nation, of his people. I read somewhere many years ago, sincerely, I could not quote the author, but it is a marvelous phrase. It says, no one more English than Shakespeare, but no one more human than Shakespeare. No one more Italian than Dante, but no one more human than Dante. No one more German than Goethe, but no one more human than Goethe. We can say the same thing for all the great spirits, for all the great minds. And Mekhitar is also in the wake of this great tradition, of the greatest genius of mankind. So, one of the most positive aspects of globalization, I think we can say, allow me the expression, is in the DNA of Armenians. We read in one of the greatest historians of world literature and one of the greatest Greek historians who perhaps created scholarly historiography, Xenophon, was also a great general, who going through historic Armenia meets a girl nearly of 12 years of age, a peasant girl. And this man speaks with this girl in passion. She was an Armenian girl. But at 12 years of age, she could speak Persian and communicate with these foreign passengers who went through Armenia. And in the 5th century, you mentioned Professor Hagop. What did it? He translated with his collaborators, with Saint Sahak and his disciples, almost the whole Christian literature, at least East Christian literature, Greek patrology, Syriac patrology into Armenian. And all the great Armenian tradition distinguished itself not only by works of exceptional value, as for instance, I mentioned Gregory of Narygorsk and Pesachore or other great poets we have, but also for translating into Armenian the treasures of world literature. Perhaps the Armenian church is the only church which has a feast of holy saint translators. Sırpot Tarkmançatstona. And it is very meaningful. It is not only a symbolic value. It is something very real because I said it was in the inner tradition of Armenia and of Armenian spirituality, of Armenian ideology. I see ideology not in the current political sense of the word, but in the sense of the German word, Weltanschauung. This great vision of the word, which should be at the root of the true globalization, of the globalization in the best sense of the word, not in its rather negative aspects, which is making a common platform of everything, cancelling differences, while each difference, when understood correctly, is a richness, is a treasure for humanity. So that Mekhitar is a forerunner also of the globalization movement, very deeply rooted in the Armenian tradition, but at the same time with great overtures on the future, and perhaps we can deepen in the last phase of our talk this aspect.
So what I get from your thoughts is that we have to open a window, as the generation of Mr. Mashtos did, and Mekhitar did, a window to the world, to communicate with the world, to get first from the world in order to give to the world, which looks like we have renounced that possibility. We don't, the Mekhitarians used to write, research, translate astronomy, philosophy, theology, history, world history, not Armenian history. Now, what Armenians do whenever we're in an Armenian setting is only Armenian or Armenian matters, or if you want to focus more on just the genocide.
Well, I would say that Mekhitar, of course, was a great genius, but he didn't work by himself. He also was surrounded by a great community of Armenian merchants. I am full of admiration for these people. Let be our businessmen of today, the sons and the daughters of those people. I have a book, The Armenian Way to Modernity, where I speak about the capital and the culture marriage. We speak very often of the empire of Tigran the Great. Of course, it was an empire, not a very big empire. It was not the Roman Empire, not the Ottoman Empire, not the Chinese Empire. And its duration was very short in history, maximum 40 years. But we had another empire, and we almost don't speak of it, the Armenian Commerce. The Armenian commerce, the Armenian market, the Armenian businessmen dominated all the routes of international commerce, starting from late 16th century till the mid of the 18th century, from China, from Xi'an till Amsterdam and London. One of the greatest philosophers, Immanuel Kant, speaks of this commerce, and even I would not dare to repeat his words if they were not said by such an extraordinary genius as Immanuel Kant, also a person who was not inclined to easy emotions. He was not an emotional person. He says, there is a Christian people in the world, the Armenians, who make commerce all through the world, the ancient world yet. And they become a trade union of peace and of friendship among people whom they meet on their way. I think a greater praise of businessmen could not be given, and especially when this comment is made by such a great philosopher as Immanuel Kant. So I think also it's a very accurate. Mekhitarians was said, for instance, by the Shahrimanian people. The Shahrimanians were the first from Jura, from Old Jura originally. They came to Isfahan, and they dominated for almost 100 years the great commerce of the world. They were the first to decrease the interests on loans. They decreased it till to 10%, which today seems to us a great amount of interest, but think that normal interest in those times were 100%, minimum 50%, 80%, sometimes 200%. And they gave to the Serenissima of Venice, to the Venetian Republic, something like 2 million golden ducats, ducati d'oro, 2 million. I make the calculation, I don't go into details, it is something like 15 billion of euros today. So that these people, Shahrimanians, had Mekhitar. They are enlightened people. They were in love with culture, with science. And I think that it was also probably the memory of this business, Armenian business, which induced the Serenissima, the Venetian government, to be so generous with Mekhitar, because the government had a recent law, some years before the arrival of Mekhitar to Venice, that no new monastery could be founded in the city, because there were too many monasteries. And they had some problems also with the government and with the society. They made an exception. I think without the memory of the help that Armenians paid to Venice, because they say in some decrees or opinions that expressed the 5 wise men of the Republic to the Doge to take his decisions, they say we must make every possible help to these very beloved and very well-deserving people, because they are now the only source which take money into our cities. As the years of the wars with the Ottoman Empire in Crete, in Candia.
Yeah, so we're out of time almost,
Yes.
but synthesizing what you were saying is, in order to have a global Armenian culture, we had global Armenian money, which was wisely redirected to culture by Mekhitarians and his associates and disciples, and innovated for us to have our contemporary Armenian culture. Can you just, in a couple sentences, give us an idea whether that is still possible today? Because there is a lot of global Armenian money. Do we have also the idea, and do we have also that vision that Mekhitarians and his associate had?
I think, I have to be very frank, we have a trauma. We have the trauma of the genocide. And I think that we must be able, we must look for the ways to overwhelm this trauma, to come out from this, we can say, somehow blind alley. If we speak and we make a comparison of our speech between past and future, our speech regards 90% the past and some 10% the future. I think
In the best of the possibilities.
in the best of the possibilities. I think that we are a traumatized generation. And this trauma perhaps even increases with generations. Now we probably are of time, so that I think our main object must be to look to the future, learning from the past, even from this awful tragedy, which has been our genocide of our people. But we must look forwards, learning from the past, and I would close with the Mekhitarian school. I think if it has, and I am sure it has, I believe very firmly that the Mekhitarian school, Mekhitari himself, have a great message for Armenians, but not only for Armenians today. And to explain this, I close with the phrase of Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard, another great philosopher, who say, "It is not possible to live looking to the past. We must look forwards." But he says, we can't look forwards without understanding our past. So
that's a very great note, positive note to end our conversation, and we'll leave looking at the future. Thank you.